Imagine this. You wake up one morning and everything feels wrong. The walls of your room seem closer than usual, the air heavier, as if the weight of your life has settled into the atmosphere. You drag yourself out of bed, but the mirror reflects a stranger, someone tired, someone hollow. You go through the motions of your day, the same job, the same routines, the same conversations. But beneath the surface, there's a gnawing ache, a quiet voice whispering, "This isn't it. This can't be all there is." You've felt this before, haven't you? That restless yearning for something more, something different. Yet, here you are still stuck in the same patterns, the same habits, the same life. Why? Why do you stay in a job that drains you, a relationship that leaves you empty, a lifestyle that feels like a slow suffocation? Why do you cling to the very things that make you miserable? Here's the paradox. Humans are wired for survival, for growth, for meaning. Yet, so many of us choose to stay in situations that stifle us, that shrink our souls. We complain about our lives, but we resist change with a ferocity that defies logic. We'd rather endure the familiar ache of misery than face the terrifying unknown of transformation. Why? What if the answer lies not in laziness or lack of ambition, but in something far deeper, far more insidious? What if the very mechanisms designed to protect us, our minds, our emotions, our identities, are the very things keeping us trapped? What if misery, as counterintuitive as it sounds, feels safer than change? Consider this. Change is a death, not a physical death, but a psychological one. It requires the death of who you are now, the death of your current identity, your current beliefs, your current comfort zone. And death, even metaphorical, is terrifying. It's the ultimate unknown. It's stepping off the edge of a cliff without knowing if there's ground beneath you. Misery, on the other hand, is familiar. It's predictable. It's a known quantity. And the human mind, for all its complexity, will always choose the devil it knows over the angel it doesn't. But here's the deeper question. What if this preference for misery isn't just a personal failing, but a societal one? What if the systems we live in, the cultural narratives, the economic structures, the social expectations, are designed to keep us complacent, to keep us just comfortable enough to stay where we are, but never so fulfilled that we dare to dream of something more? Think about it. From the moment we're born, we're handed a script. Go to school, get a job, get married, buy a house, retire, die. It's a script that promises stability, but at what cost? What happens when the script doesn't align with your soul? What happens when the life you're living feels like a lie? And yet, even when we recognize the lie, even when we feel the ache of misalignment, we stay. We stay because the alternative, stepping into the unknown, rewriting the script, becoming someone new, feels impossible. It feels like madness, it feels like death. But what if the real madness is staying? What if the real death is the slow erosion of your soul, day by day, year by year, until there's nothing left but a hollow shell of who you could have been? This is the great question. Why do we prefer the misery we know over the change we fear? And more importantly, how do we break free from this self-imposed prison? The answer lies not in quick fixes or superficial solutions, but in a deep dive into the human psyche, into the philosophical roots of our resistance, into the societal forces that shape our choices. It's a journey into the shadows, into the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. It's a confrontation with the very things that scare us most. But here's the truth. Until we face these shadows, until we understand why we cling to misery, we will remain trapped. We will remain stuck in lives that feel like slow deaths, wondering why we can't seem to change, why we can't seem to break free. So let's begin. Let's peel back the layers of this paradox one by one until we uncover the hidden forces that keep us chained. Let's explore why most people prefer misery over change, and how you can be one of the few who dares to choose differently, because the alternative, Staying where you are, living a life that feels like a lie, is no life at all. To understand why we cling to misery, we must first confront a truth that is as unsettling as it is universal. The human mind is not designed for happiness. It is designed for survival, and survival, as it turns out, often requires us to endure suffering rather than risk the unknown. This is not a flaw in our design, but a feature. Evolution has hardwired us to prioritize safety over growth, familiarity over novelty, and certainty over possibility. Our brains are prediction machines, constantly scanning the environment for threats and rewards. And while rewards are nice, threats are deadly. So we err on the side of caution. We stick to what we know, even if what we know is painful. But this survival mechanism, while useful in the wild, becomes a prison in the modern world. We no longer face saber-toothed tigers or famine, but our brains still operate as if we do. The result? We treat emotional discomfort, boredom, dissatisfaction, loneliness as existential threats. And instead of confronting these feelings, we numb them. We distract ourselves with social media, binge-watching, shopping, or even overworking. We do anything to avoid the discomfort of sitting with ourselves, of facing the truth of our lives. This is where the great thinkers of psychology and philosophy come in. Carl Jung called this avoidance the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject, suppress, or ignore. He believed that until we integrate our shadow, until we face the uncomfortable truths about who we are, we will remain trapped in cycles of self-sabotage and suffering. Friedrich Nietzsche took this idea further. He argued that humans have a will to power, a drive to overcome challenges, to grow, to become more. But this will, he warned, is often thwarted by fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of the unknown. And so, we settle. We choose the safety of mediocrity over the risk of greatness. Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of pessimism, saw this struggle as inherent to the human condition. He believed that life is fundamentally characterized by suffering, and that our attempts to escape it through pleasure, success, or distraction are ultimately futile. The only way to transcend suffering, he argued, is to confront it head-on, to accept it as an inevitable part of existence. Jean-Paul Sartre, the father of existentialism, offered a different perspective. He believed that humans are condemned to be free, that we have no choice but to choose, and that this freedom is both our greatest gift and our heaviest burden. But instead of embracing this freedom, most of us flee from it. We hide behind roles, routines, and societal expectations because the responsibility of creating our own meaning is too terrifying. And then there's Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, who observed that even in the most horrific circumstances, humans have the capacity to find meaning. But this requires courage, the courage to confront suffering, to embrace uncertainty, to take responsibility for our lives. So what do these thinkers reveal about our preference for misery? They show us that it's not just a personal failing, but a deeply ingrained psychological and philosophical phenomenon. It's the result of our survival instincts, our fear of the unknown, and our reluctance to confront the shadowy parts of ourselves. But there's another layer to this problem: societal conditioning. From a young age, we are taught to conform, to follow the rules, to fit in. We are rewarded for obedience and punished for rebellion. Over time, this conditioning shapes our identities, our values, our sense of what's possible. We internalize the belief that success means a stable job, a nice house, a happy family. And when reality falls short of these ideals, we feel like failures. But here's the twist: even when we achieve these things, we often still feel empty. Why? Because these ideals are not our own. They are handed to us by a society that prioritizes Productivity over purpose, conformity over creativity, and consumption over connection. This is the hidden problem. We are caught in a double bind. On one hand, our survival instincts and societal conditioning push us towards safety and conformity. On the other hand, our souls yearn for meaning, for growth, for authenticity. And so, we oscillate between these two poles, never fully committing to either. We stay in jobs we hate because they pay the bills. We stay in relationships that drain us because we fear being alone. We stay in lives that feel like prisons because we don't know how to break free. But here's the truth. The chains that bind us are not made of steel. They are made of fear, of conditioning, of unexamined beliefs. And the key to breaking free lies not in changing our circumstances, but in changing our minds. This is the journey we must undertake, a journey into the depths of our psyche, into the roots of our resistance, into the societal forces that shape our choices. It's a journey that requires courage, curiosity, and a willingness. The preference for misery over change is not just a personal tragedy, it is a collective one. Its consequences ripple outward, shaping not only individual lives, but the very fabric of society. To see this, we must look beyond the surface, beyond the daily grind, the quiet desperation, the unspoken regrets, and into the deeper patterns that define our world. Consider this. A society built on the avoidance of discomfort is a society built on lies. It is a society where people wear masks, where authenticity is sacrificed for approval, where the pursuit of meaning is replaced by the pursuit of status. It is a society where mental health crises, addiction, and chronic dissatisfaction are not anomalies, but norms. Let's start with the individual. When we choose misery over change, we are not just stagnating, we are actively eroding our sense of self. Every time we suppress our desires, silence our intuition, or betray our values, we chip away at our integrity. Over time, this creates a disconnect between who we are and who we pretend to be. We become strangers to ourselves, living lives that feel hollow, empty, and devoid of meaning. This disconnect has profound psychological consequences. Studies show that people who live inauthentic lives are more likely to experience anxiety, depression, and burnout. They are more likely to engage in self-destructive behaviors, substance abuse, compulsive shopping, emotional eating, as a way to numb the pain of their inner conflict. They are also more likely to feel a pervasive sense of emptiness, as if something essential is missing from their lives. But the consequences don't stop at the individual level. They extend into our relationships, our communities, and our institutions. When we live inauthentic lives, we create inauthentic connections. We build relationships based on convenience rather than compatibility, on surface-level interactions rather than deep emotional intimacy. We settle for transactional exchanges rather than transformative bonds. This erosion of authenticity has a ripple effect. It creates a culture of disconnection, where people feel isolated even in crowded rooms, where loneliness becomes an epidemic, where genuine human connection is increasingly rare. It also creates a culture of mistrust, where people are wary of vulnerability, where masks are worn not just to hide our flaws, but to protect ourselves from judgment and rejection. And then there are the societal consequences. A society that prioritizes comfort over growth, conformity over creativity, and consumption over connection is a society in decline. It is a society where innovation is stifled, where critical thinking is discouraged, where the status quo is preserved at all costs. It is a society where systemic problems, inequality, environmental degradation, political polarization are ignored or denied, because confronting them would require discomfort, sacrifice, and change. This is the paradox of our preference for misery. It creates a world that is both stagnant and chaotic. On the surface, everything appears stable, People go to work, pay their bills, follow the rules. But beneath the surface, there is a simmering discontent, a growing sense that something is fundamentally wrong. And when this discontent reaches a tipping point, it erupts in the form of social unrest, political upheaval, or personal breakdowns. But perhaps the most insidious consequence of our preference for misery is the way it perpetuates itself. When we choose comfort over growth, we send a message to ourselves, to others, to future generations, that safety is more important than fulfillment. We normalize the idea that life is supposed to be a series of compromises, that happiness is a luxury, that dreams are for the naive. This normalization is dangerous because it becomes self-reinforcing. The more people who choose misery over change, the harder it becomes for anyone to choose differently. The more we see others settling, the more we believe that settling is inevitable. The more we internalize the belief that life is supposed to be hard, the less we question the systems and structures that make it so. And so, the cycle continues. Generation after generation, people live lives of quiet desperation, wondering why they feel so empty, so disconnected, so unfulfilled. They blame themselves, their circumstances, their luck. But they rarely question the deeper forces at play, the psychological, philosophical, and societal forces that keep them trapped. This is the unseen consequence of our preference for misery. It creates a world where suffering is normalized, where authenticity is rare, where change is feared. It creates a world where people are asleep, not because they want to be, but because they don't know how to wake up. But here's the truth. Waking up is possible. Breaking free is possible. It requires courage, yes. It requires discomfort, yes. But it also offers something far more valuable, the chance to live a life that is truly your own. The question is, are you ready to take that chance? Breaking free from the preference for misery is not a single act, but a revolution, a rebellion against the forces within and without that keep us trapped. It requires a radical shift in perspective, a willingness to confront the uncomfortable, and a commitment to living authentically. But how do we begin? How do we dismantle the walls we've built around ourselves and step into the unknown? The first step is to recognize that the walls exist. For most of us, the preference for misery is so ingrained, so normalized, that we don't even see it as a choice. We think this is just how life is, but it's not. It's how life has become because of the stories we've been told, the fears we've internalized, and the compromises we've made. To break free, we must question these stories. We must ask ourselves, who told me that success looks a certain way? Who taught me to fear failure, to avoid risk, to prioritize safety over growth? Where did I learn that my worth is tied to my productivity, my appearance, my possessions? This process of questioning is not easy. It requires us to confront the narratives that have shaped our identities, to challenge the beliefs that have guided our choices, and to face the fears that have held us back. But it is also liberating. Because once we see these stories for what they are, constructs, not truths, we can begin to rewrite them. The second step is to embrace discomfort. This is perhaps the hardest part of the journey because it goes against everything we've been taught. From a young age, we are conditioned to avoid discomfort, to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and stay within our comfort zones. But here's the truth: growth happens outside the comfort zone. Transformation requires discomfort. This doesn't mean we should seek out suffering for its own sake. It means we should be willing to tolerate discomfort in pursuit of something greater. It means saying no to the things that drain us and yes to the things that scare us. It means sitting with our emotions instead of numbing them, facing our fears instead of running from them, and taking risks instead of playing it safe. The third step is to reclaim our agency. One of the most insidious effects of our preference For misery is the way it erodes our sense of control. We start to believe that we are powerless, that our circumstances, our genetics, or our past define us. But this is a lie. As Viktor Frankl observed, even in the most dire circumstances, we have the power to choose our response. We may not be able to control what happens to us, but we can control how we interpret it, how we react to it, and what meaning we assign to it. This is the essence of agency, the recognition that we are not passive victims of our lives, but active participants in their creation. Reclaiming agency requires us to take responsibility, not for everything that happens to us, but for how we respond to it. It means owning our choices, learning from our mistakes, and refusing to blame others for our unhappiness. It also means setting boundaries, saying no to what doesn't serve us, and prioritizing what does. The fourth step is to cultivate self-awareness. This is where the work of Carl Jung becomes invaluable. Jung believed that the path to wholeness lies in integrating our shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject, suppress, or ignore. This requires deep self-reflection, a willingness to confront our flaws, and a commitment to understanding our motivations. Self-awareness also involves recognizing the patterns that keep us stuck. Do we sabotage ourselves when we get close to success? Do we cling to relationships that no longer serve us? Do we distract ourselves from our pain instead of addressing it? These patterns are not random. They are clues to our inner world. By understanding them, we can begin to break free from them. The fifth step is to redefine success. In a society that equates success with wealth, status, and power, it's easy to lose sight of what truly matters. But success, as defined by external metrics, is often hollow. True success is internal. It's about living in alignment with our values, pursuing what brings us joy, and creating a life that feels meaningful. Redefining success requires us to let go of societal expectations and listen to our own inner voice. It means asking ourselves, what do I truly want? What brings me alive? What kind of life would I be proud to look back on? These questions are not easy to answer, but they are essential. Because until we know what success means to us, we will continue chasing someone else's version of it. The final step is to take action. All the self-reflection, discomfort, and awareness in the world won't matter if we don't act on it. Action is the bridge between where we are and where we want to be. It's the antidote to paralysis, the cure for stagnation, the key to transformation. But action doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be small, incremental, and consistent. It can be saying no to something that drains us, yes to something that excites us, or simply showing up for ourselves in a way we haven't before. The important thing is to start, to take that first step, however small, toward the life we truly want. This is the rebellion, a refusal to settle, a commitment to growth, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. It's not easy, but it is possible. And it begins with a single radical choice: to choose change over misery, authenticity over approval, and freedom over fear. But this is not the end of the journey. It is only the beginning, because breaking free is not just about escaping the old. It's about creating the new. It's about building a life that is truly your own, one that reflects your values, your passions, and your deepest truths. And that brings us to the ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization of all. The ultimate truth is this: misery is not the default state of existence. It is a choice we make every day, often unconsciously, by clinging to what is familiar, safe, and predictable. But it doesn't have to be this way. You have the power to choose differently. You have the power to choose change. This realization is both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it means you are not a victim of your circumstances, your past, or your biology. Terrifying because it means you can no longer hide behind excuses, blame, or denial. The moment you accept this truth, you become responsible for your life, your choices, your happiness. But here's the deeper truth. Change is not something that happens to you. It is something you create. It is a deliberate, intentional act of self-creation. It is the process of shedding the old, embracing the new, and becoming who you were always meant to be. This process is not linear. It is messy, unpredictable, and often painful. It requires you to confront your fears, question your beliefs, and let go of the identities that no longer serve you. It requires you to step into the unknown, to trust the process, and to believe in the possibility of something better. But here's the paradox. The more you embrace change, the more you realize that it is not something to be feared. It is something to be celebrated. Because change is life. It is growth. It is the essence of what it means to be human. Think about it. Every great transformation in history, personal, societal, or spiritual, began with a single act of courage. Someone dared to question the status quo, to imagine a different future, to take a step into the unknown. And in doing so, they changed not only their own lives, but the lives of countless others. You have this same power. You have the power to transform your life, to inspire those around you, and to contribute to the evolution of humanity. But this power lies dormant until you choose to awaken it. So how do you awaken it? By embracing the ultimate truth, that you are not here to suffer. You are here to grow, to create, to become. You are here to live a life that is authentic, meaningful, and true to who you are. This truth is not something you can intellectualize. It is something you must feel, embody, and live. It is a shift in consciousness, a realization that changes everything. When you truly understand this, you begin to see your life differently. The challenges that once seemed insurmountable become opportunities for growth. The fears that once paralyzed you become catalysts for courage. The pain that once defined you becomes a source of wisdom and strength. You begin to see that every moment is a choice between staying where you are and stepping into the unknown, between clinging to the past and embracing the future, between living a life of quiet desperation and creating a life of profound meaning. And when you make the choice to change, something extraordinary happens. You begin to align with your true self, the self that is not bound by fear, conditioning, or societal expectations. You begin to live from a place of authenticity, creativity, and love. This is the ultimate truth, that you are not here to endure life. You are here to create it. So what will you create? Will you create a life that reflects your deepest values, your wildest dreams, your truest self? Or will you continue to settle for the familiar ache of misery? The choice is yours. But remember this: the moment you choose change, you step into your power. You become the author of your story, the creator of your reality, the architect of your destiny. And in that moment, everything changes. Because the truth is not just that you can break free. The truth is that you already are free. You just have to realize it.